Hi, my name is Janakiram. I want to walk you through how to configure Appcito ADS. For this demo, I'm going to use a fictitious e-commerce portal called CloudShop that sells the latest and the greatest in the electronic world. Many customers often buy the latest gadgets from CloudShop, so that obviously demands higher availability, scalability, and reliability for the customers to access this anywhere, anytime. So to deliver the application infrastructure, we are using Amazon's EC2. As you notice, there are multiple EC2 instances configured in the Singapore region. This deployment follows the best practices recommended by AWS. So we have 4 web servers that are serving the primary web application infrastructure. There are 2 session servers responsible for caching the catalog and other product-related information, apart from caching the session information that is coming from the users, and there is a high availability database cluster that is spreading across multiple AZs. The web tier is registered with a load balancer. So we have an ELB called Shop LB, which is going to front end all the 4 web servers. And these web servers are distributed across AP Southeast 1A and 1B AZs. As you notice, all of them are in service, which means the ELB is responsible for routing the traffic, and the health of each web server is reported to be fine. When customers access the portal, they use an endpoint called demo.cloudreadylabs.com. That is primarily the DNS responsible for serving the web application. Instead of using Route 53, I'm using a third-party DNS service called DNS Made Easy. It's a managed DNS that lets us register the DNS records like the A record, the CNAME record, and so on. I have registered the ELB CNAME in DNS Made Easy to basically provide the DNS capabilities to our application. So when the customers type the URL, it is resolved by the DNS Made Easy, which is accessed through the ELB and finally served by the set of web servers residing behind the ELB. So this is a fairly simple architecture where the portal is accessed through the DNS, going via the ELB, and finally getting delivered via a set of EC2 instances. While the ELB is good for load balancing, it doesn't provide all the capabilities. And that's where we want to use Appcito Application Delivery System, or ADS. So when you sign up with Appcito ADS, you get to see this wizard, which is going to help us register our application and start optimizing our application. So the very first step that involves in registering the application is to provide a name. So let's call this demo, followed by the URL of our application, which is demo.cloudreadylabs.com. And then I'm going to let Appcito ADS know that I'm using AWS. Apart from this, I can also choose OpenStack, Azure, VMware, bare metal servers, and even other platforms like Google Compute Engine. The next step is to choose the DNS provider. Obviously, we are not using Route 53, we are using a third-party DNS service, so I choose other at this point and move to the next step. In the next step, we do an important step where we associate our account with the Appcito ADS, and for that there are 2 steps required. One is to create a policy document, and the second is to associate the policy document with an IAM role which has access to our application. If you're not familiar with IAM, this step has very detailed walkthrough that you could follow to create the policy as well as IAM role. I have gone ahead and created the role as well as the policy. So let's take a look at the policy first. So there is a policy called Appcito policy, which is explicitly giving permissions for the role to access EC2, Route 53 for DNS manipulation, CloudWatch for logging and getting the alarms, and of course the Elastic Load Balancer, and finally SNS and auto scaling for participating in the auto scale function. So once the policy document is created, that is associated with a role which we are going to see here. The Appcito role is basically acting as the delegated role for gaining access to our application. So we are explicitly enabling Appcito ADS to talk to our application through this role. So once these two are configured, we can move to the next step and input the role ARN. Once you created the role, you actually notice that there is an ARN that is created. You can grab this and input that in the wizard. Since I have already created, the wizard is pointing me to an existing role, which I'm going to accept and move to the next step. The next step is very crucial, where Appcito ADS basically does a discovery of our deployment. Like a typical DevOps engineer, it's scanning the available instances, the infrastructure, and what's currently deployed. It found that we are using an ELB, and at this point I have two choices. One, to use the same app servers that are registered with the ELB, or I can manually input the application servers that I would want to participate in the load balancing and application optimization. Since we are attempting to replace ELB with Appcito ADS, I choose the first option and move to the next step. Here we notice that ADS has detected 4 instances, all the 4 web servers that are registered with the ELB, and I can either give the weightage based on how I would want to route the traffic or stick to one of the available load balancing schemes. So let's choose the default least connection scheme and move to the next step. In the next step, ADS would launch what is called as the CSP, or the Cloud Service Proxy. Think of the Cloud Service Proxy as an agent that's going to sit next to your application tier and handling all the policy management and routing the request to your application. Each CSP translates to an EC2 instance. That's the reason why this pop-up prompts us to choose the instance size and the options to enable auto scale, along with the min and max instances that you would want to run in the auto scale configuration. So we choose the defaults and click on continue. This is going to take a while because ADS will instantiate the EC2 instances running the CSP and will start wiring up the instances with the CSP so that it can start routing the traffic. So this is going to take a while, and now the application is being initiated. At this point, the CSPs are created and the control plane of Appcito ADS is swinging into action by doing the initial configuration of connecting to the PEPs and setting up the baseline infrastructure for optimizing and for configuring our application. So ADS is now configured successfully and we are almost there. So in the next step, we just need to perform the final step of associating our DNS with the Appcito endpoint. Now let's make sure that our application is still using ELB. So I'm going to ping the URL, and it shows that we are still dealing with the load balancer, the ELB. Now what I'm going to do is click on this toggle button, which is enable CSP, and then take this application DNS endpoint, the CNAME, and feed it to my DNS management service. So we are effectively replacing the ELB with Appcito ADS at this point. Click on submit, and I'm leaving the TTL to 10 because this is an aggressive TTL for immediate propagation. So let's close this, and now let's go back to the command prompt and ping the URL. If you notice, the URL is pointing to the cafe node followed by a long unique identifier which is coming from the Appcito ADS. That's an indication that we have successfully replaced the ELB with the Appcito ADS. Now, let's go back to the portal and do a refresh. The best thing is the end user doesn't even realize that we have quietly replaced the plain vanilla ELB with Appcito ADS. The experience is exactly the same and the whole operation has been absolutely transparent to the end users, which means you can perform this with little to no downtime at all. Once we have updated the CSP and the application DNS endpoint, we can start taking advantage of this. So to show you some of the benefits of using this, I have a pre-configured application pointing to exactly the same URL and I have generated some traffic. One of the key advantages of using Appcito ADS is the insights that you can derive from your application. So let's look at the analytics dashboard. Here, when I look at the dashboard, it is pretty insightful and delivers a lot of operational data to us. So if you look at the first option, it actually talks about the popular URLs. I've only been hitting the home page, so that seems to be the most popular URL. I can also go ahead and take a look at the geographic request distribution. So it looks like Japan has been sending a lot of traffic, followed by Singapore, US, Ireland, and of course from India, where I have initiated the test. So that's not all. You can also look at the response time, which gives us a very detailed insight into how the application has been performing. So this dashboard, called the end-to-end service response time, precisely tells us where is the bottleneck in the application. This is actually mapped to a color coordinated depiction here. So when you expand this, you can take a look at the highs and lows of the entire processing pipeline. With this, it's very easy to identify where the bottleneck is in terms of the performance and the response time. So this is just scratching the surface. Appcito ADS has many insightful analytics and dashboards that you can drill into. But as you have seen, it's been fairly simple and straightforward for us to replace an ELB with an Appcito ADS and start using the insights. Apart from the analytics and the load balancing capabilities, Appcito also has a security configuration where you can configure many filters and policies that will protect you from the bots and the DDoS attacks and SQL injection attacks and many more. So thanks for watching this and I hope you found this useful. Go ahead and sign up for Appcito trial and you can very quickly start using these capabilities.